You're settling in for the night, maybe propped against pillows, maybe stretched across your bed, the glow of your phone still dancing behind your eyelids, your mind still buzzing with notifications, emails, messages that pinged just moments before you decided enough was enough for today. But before we dive deep into this journey, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Tell me in the comments what time you're watching this and where in the world you are right now, because tonight we're about to discover something that will completely change how you think about rest, about sleep, about what it means to truly unwind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now close your eyes for just a second and imagine sleep without the anxiety, without the racing thoughts, without the blue light glasses and blackout curtains and white noise machines and meditation apps and sleep trackers counting every restless moment. Imagine rest without the pressure to optimize it, without articles telling you the perfect room temperature or the ideal bedtime routine or which supplements to take or how many hours you absolutely must get to function like a human being tomorrow. Imagine sleep that comes not because you've engineered the perfect conditions, but because your body has no choice but to surrender. Picture this. No buzzing smartwatch on your wrist, no phone charging 3 feet away from your head, no notification light blinking like a digital heartbeat in the corner of your room, no podcast playing to drown out your thoughts, no air conditioning humming its mechanical lullaby, no car alarms piercing the night, no sirens wailing in the distance, no neighbor's television bleeding through thin walls, no delivery trucks rumbling past at midnight, no airplane engines drawing lines across the sky above your restless head. Instead, imagine exhaustion. So pure, so bone deep, so honest that it doesn't negotiate with your mind. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't ask if you've checked your email one last time or scrolled through social media or worried about tomorrow's presentation or calculated how many hours you'll get if you fall asleep right now. This very second. Imagine fatigue that comes not from staring at screens or sitting in traffic or processing endless streams of information, but from using your body the way bodies were meant to be used, from moving and lifting and working until your muscles sing with the sweet ache of labor completed. Think about lying down, not on memory foam, engineered in laboratories, not on mattresses that cost more than some people make in months, not between sheets with thread counts that have become status symbols, but on straw. Yes, straw that crackles when you move, that smells like the earth, and the seasons that pokes at your ribs and reminds you that comfort is not a given, but something earned through the simple act of surviving another day. Tonight, we're travelling back not to the castles of kings where silk and velvet cushioned royal dreams, not to the monasteries where monks pursued divine visions in their cells, not to the manor houses where lords and ladies slept behind tapestried walls, but to the most humble dwellings in all of medieval Europe, to the dirt-floored cottages where families huddled together through long winter nights, to the places where people owned almost nothing but somehow possessed something we've lost entirely. Because here's what will shock you. Here's what will make you question everything you think you know, about progress, about civilization, about the march of human improvement. The poorest people in medieval Europe, the ones who had no choice about where they slept or when they slept or how they slept, the ones who couldn't afford candles to extend their days or fires large enough to heat separate rooms, the ones who shared beds not by choice but by necessity, who fell asleep to the sounds of animals and weather and each other's breathing. These people, the forgotten masses who left no written records of their rest, who never appeared in illuminated manuscripts or historical chronicles, these peasants, these serfs, these labourers, whose names history never bothered to remember, had something that all our technology, all our knowledge, all our optimization and biohacking and sleep science hasn't been able to give us back. They had the most profound, the most restorative, the most naturally perfect sleep that human beings have ever experienced. Not because their lives were easy. Not because they were free from worry. They lived on the edge of survival every single day. Not because they had discovered some secret technique or followed some ancient wisdom, but because they lived in harmony with rhythms so fundamental, so deeply embedded in human biology, that we've forgotten they ever existed. They slept when darkness fell, because darkness was absolute. They woke when light returned, because light meant survival. They rested when their bodies demanded it, because ignoring that demand meant death, and in that surrender to forces beyond their control, They found something we spend billions of dollars chasing, something we download apps to achieve, something we've turned into an industry but can never quite grasp. The sleep of medieval peasants wasn't just better than ours, it was perfect in ways that would make modern sleep scientists weep with envy. It was segmented and natural, following patterns that our ancestors knew by heart. It was communal and warming, shared between bodies that understood the precious gift of shared heat. It was earned through labour so demanding that the body had no choice but to collapse gratefully into whatever rest it could find, and it was uninterrupted by the constant hum of a world that never stops demanding our attention. So settle back, take a deep breath, and prepare to discover why the poorest people who ever lived might have been the richest in the one thing that matters most, the ability to truly, deeply, completely rest, and why everything we think we know about sleep might be exactly backwards. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You don't know what hour it is, nobody does, not in the way you understand time. Now there's no glowing digital display counting down the minutes until morning, no phone screen lighting up your face at 2:47 a.m, showing you exactly how little sleep you'll get if you fall asleep right this moment. No clock ticking away on the wall, marking each second that passes while you lie there calculating and recalculating your rest. Here in this place, in this time, there are no bells chiming the hour from distant church towers. That luxury belongs to towns, to cities, to places where merchants and guildmasters need to coordinate their days, but you live beyond the reach of measured time. You live in a cottage so far from civilization that the nearest village is a day's walk through forests that have never known the sound of a church bell. The darkness around you is not the darkness. You know, it's not the dim glow of streetlights bleeding through curtains, or the faint electronic hum of devices on standby, or the distant wash of city lights painting the sky a dull orange. This is darkness, absolute, complete, the kind that swallows sound and sight, and makes the world shrink to the space your hand can touch when you reach out into the black. Above your head, thick bundles of straw and mud seal out. Not just the rain, but every trace of light that might leak in from moon or stars. The walls around you are not painted drywall or decorated plaster, but rough-hewn timber chinked with mud and moss, still damp from the last storm. Tiny gaps between the logs whisper with wind that carries the scent of pine and earth, and something wilder, something that reminds you that beyond these walls lies a world that belongs not to humans, but to creatures with glowing eyes and silent paws. The floor beneath the straw you lie on is not wood or tile or carpet. It's packed earth, hard as stone in summer, soft as clay. When the rains come tonight, it's cold, so cold that the chill seeps through the straw, through the rough wool blanket, through your clothes such as they are into your bones. But this cold is honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. The breath of winter seeking entry. The reminder that warmth is not a right but a gift. There's a fire, but calling it a fire would be generous. It's embers now, glowing coals that throw just enough light to reveal the shapes around you. The hulking form of a wooden table, the shadow of clay pots stacked against the wall, the outline of a door so low you'd have to duck to pass through it. This light doesn't reach the corners, doesn't banish the darkness, but lives within it. Like a secret shared between the flames and the night. You can smell everything. Wood smoke, yes, but also unwashed bodies and damp wool and something cooking. Or maybe something that cooked hours ago, the scent of turnips and barley. And if you're lucky on feast days, the memory of meat. But mostly it's the smell of life, lived close to the earth, close to the bone, close to the edge of survival. The smell of humans who haven't bathed in weeks, who wear the same clothes until they fall apart, who sleep in the same room where they cook and eat and give birth and die. The sounds around you are not the sounds of civilization. No traffic humming in the distance, no air conditioning cycling on and off, no neighbours arguing through thin walls, no television murmuring in another room. Instead, you hear wind in the thatch above your head, the settling and cracking of timber as the house breathes with the changing temperature, the rustle of mice, or maybe something larger moving through the walls, the distant howl of wolves that makes everyone shift closer together without waking. This is not a bedroom. This is not even a room. In the way you understand rooms, it's a single space that contains an entire life. Birth happens here, death happens here, meals are cooked and eaten, prayers are whispered. Children are conceived and nursed animals, sometimes shelter here when the storms grow too fierce. The boundaries between sleeping and waking, between private and shared, between human and animal, blur into something that would feel claustrophobic to modern minds, but here feels like safety. The bed you lie on is not a bed. It's a raised platform of wooden planks covered with straw that gets changed when it starts to rot, covered with whatever cloth the family has managed to gather over years, heavy wool blankets passed down through generations, patched and repatched, until more patches than original fabric remain linen. So rough it feels like burlap against skin that has never known silk or cotton. You share this space, this warmth, this breath with everyone you love, and some you merely tolerate: your parents, if they're still alive, your siblings, your spouse, your children, your cousin who had nowhere else to go, the old woman from down the path whose own cottage burned last winter. Bodies pressed together not from affection, but from necessity, heat shared like food, like water, like any other resource too precious to waste. And in this alien landscape, in this world so foreign to everything you know about comfort and privacy and personal space, something extraordinary happens, something that would seem impossible to anyone who has spent years optimizing their sleep environment, investing in the perfect mattress, buying blackout curtains and white noise machines and temperature-controlled bedding. In this place, where every modern sleep expert would say rest should be impossible, where every condition for good sleep is absent, where noise and cold and discomfort rule, the night sleep comes fast as deeper, more completely than anything you have ever experienced. It comes not despite these conditions, but because of them, not fighting against the environment, but flowing with it. Like water, finding its level. Like roots, finding soil, like the most natural thing in the world. Your body carries the weight of a day that began before the sun thought to rise. You woke not to an alarm, not to the gentle chime of a smartphone app designed to rouse you during your lightest sleep phase, but to the lowing of cattle, whose udders had grown heavy in the night, whose bodies knew the rhythm of milk and dawn better than any timepiece ever could. Your feet hit the cold earth floor, and immediately your muscles remembered what they were born to do. Not sit in chairs, not stare at screens, not type on keyboards, but work real work, the kind that shapes bone and sinew and teaches your body the honest language of fatigue. Your arms ache not from repetitive stress, injuries not from poor ergonomics, not from holding a phone too long, but from hauling buckets of water from the well, a quarter-mile through the woods, buckets so heavy that by the third trip your shoulders burn and your grip threatens to fail. But you don't fail, because failure means thirst, means death, means watching your children's lips crack and their eyes dim. So you haul water until your back screams, then you haul more, because that's what bodies do when survival depends on it. They find strength in places you didn't know existed. Your hands tell stories that modern hands have forgotten. They're cracked from cold, split from rough work stained with soil, that no amount of scrubbing can completely remove. Your palms are thick with calluses earned from gripping rope and wood and tools made by other calloused hands. Your fingers know the weight of grain, the texture of wool fresh from the sheep, the resistance of dough that must be kneaded until your wrists feel like they might snap. These hands have pulled weeds until your knuckles bled, have milked cows until your forearms cramped, have spun thread until your thumb and forefinger developed their own permanent ache. But this pain, this honest pain that comes from using your body as it was designed to be used, is different from the pain that haunts modern bodies. This isn't the dull throb of a neck bent over a computer screen for 8 hours, or the sharp sting of eyes strained from blue light, or the persistent ache of muscles that have forgotten how to move. This is the deep, satisfying burn that comes after useful labour, after accomplishment, after moving through the world in a way that creates rather than consumes. Your legs carry stories too. Miles walked every single day, not on smooth pavement, not on cushioned tracks, but over rough ground, through mud that sucks at your boots, up hills that leave you gasping down slopes that test your balance with every step. You walk to the fields before dawn. You walk between tasks all day. You walk home after sunset. Your calves know every rock and root on the path to the village. Your thighs remember the weight of children carried on your hip, sacks of grain slung over your shoulder, bundles of wood gathered from the forest. By evening your body has been wrung out like wet cloth, twisted and squeezed until every muscle fibre has given what it has to give your spine curves from bending over crops, over wash basins, over the endless tasks that keep life moving forward. Your knees creak from kneeling in fields in prayer, beside beds where the sick lie waiting. Your ankles throb from standing on uneven ground, from balancing loads that would challenge modern athletes who train for strength rather than survival. This exhaustion, this bone-deep weariness that settles into your marrow like heavy cream, is earned through honest transaction with the physical world. You haven't sat in traffic burning fossil fuels while your body atrophies. You haven't scrolled through social media until your thumb develops its own repetitive stress injury. You haven't binge-watched series while your muscles slowly forget their purpose. Instead, you've used every part of yourself in service of staying alive and keeping others alive too. Your heart has pumped hard today, not from anxiety, not from caffeine, not from the artificial stress of deadlines and notifications, but from exertion, from climbing, from lifting, from running after escaped chickens, from chasing children away from the fire, from dancing at the harvest celebration when the work was finally done. For a few brief hours, your heart has earned its rest through honest labour, rather than through the artificial stimulation that keeps modern hearts racing even in sleep. Your lungs have worked today, breathing clean air. Yes, but also air thick with chaff from threshing grain, dusty from mucking out animal stalls sharp with cold that makes each breath visible in the winter morning. Your breathing has deepened and slowed and quickened with the rhythm of work, not with the shallow anxiety breathing that comes from modern life, but with the full-bodied respiration of someone who uses their entire lung capacity in service of survival. Your stomach is not full. It's rarely full, but it's satisfied in a way that modern stomachs with their constant access to processed food and artificial flavours never quite achieve. You've eaten bread, you helped mill from grain, you helped harvest, you've tasted vegetables you pulled from soil, you helped prepare, you've drunk milk still warm from cows, you milked yourself. This food isn't entertainment, isn't comfort, isn't distraction. It's fuel, pure and simple, and your body recognizes it as such. Even your mind is tired, but tired in the right way, not from processing endless streams of information, not from making countless micro-decisions, not from the constant background anxiety of modern life, but from solving real problems with immediate consequences: how to fix the roof before the next storm, how to make the grain last until harvest, how to keep the fire burning through the night. These are puzzles with clear solutions where thinking leads to action and action leads to results you can see and touch and sleep upon. As darkness falls, your body doesn't fight. It doesn't resist the coming of night with artificial light and stimulation. Instead, it recognizes sunset as signal that the day's work is done, that survival has been achieved for another day, that rest is not just deserved, but necessary for tomorrow's challenges. Your muscles literally cannot work anymore. Your bones feel like they're settling deeper into your flesh. Your eyelids grow heavy, not from screen fatigue, but from the simple accumulated weight of a day lived fully. This is fatigue as medicine, exhaustion as healer, weariness as the most natural sleep aid ever created. Your body has spent itself completely in service of life, and now it demands payment in the form of rest. Deep, honest, unconscious. Rest that doesn't negotiate, doesn't bargain, doesn't lie awake wondering if it's getting enough recovery time. Because when exhaustion is real, when it comes from genuine exertion, rather than artificial stress, the body knows exactly how to heal itself. You lie down not because the clock says it's bedtime, but because your body begs for horizontal. Not because you've completed your evening routine, but because standing has become impossible. Not because you've optimized your sleep schedule, but because consciousness itself has become a burden too heavy to carry. And in that surrender to genuine physical need, you discover what sleep was always meant to be. Not a break from life, but the foundation that makes life possible. You don't sleep alone in this world. Nobody does not because you've chosen companionship, but because solitude is a luxury that belongs to the wealthy, to those who can afford separate rooms, separate beds, separate lives. Here in this single chamber that serves as kitchen, bedroom, nursery, and sometimes stable, you share the night with everyone who matters to you and some who simply have nowhere else to go. Your mother lies to your left, her breathing already deepening into the rhythm you've known since childhood, that soft wheeze that starts in her chest and settles into a pattern as familiar as your own heartbeat. She smells like the herbs she dried today, like the bread dough that still clings to her fingernails, like the particular mixture of sweat and wool and wood smoke that defines home. You don't think about her age, about the grey that streaks her hair, about the way her hands shake slightly when she thinks no one is watching. Instead, you listen to her breathe and know that as long as that sound continues, the world still makes sense. To your right, your younger brother shifts restlessly, his feet cold against your calf, his elbow finding your ribs in that unconscious way. Siblings learn to navigate shared space. He mutters something unintelligible, a fragment of dream, or maybe a response to some conversation from earlier today. His body is still growing, still hungry, still burning energy, even in sleep, and he radiates heat like a small furnace. You don't push him away, you don't complain about his restless limbs. Instead, you absorb his warmth and offer yours in return because heat shared is heat doubled. Beyond him, your father lies like a fallen tree, heavy and still, except for the occasional snore that rattles through the cottage like distant thunder. His day started before yours and ended after his body bears the accumulated weight of 30 years, working land that belongs to someone else. 30 years of bending and lifting and carrying, until his spine has formed a permanent curve that follows the shape of labour. His hands, even in sleep, remain slightly curved, as if still gripping some invisible tool, some burden that never quite gets set down. Near the door, your cousin Elena curls around her infant daughter, both of them breathing in the synchronized rhythm that nursing mothers know the baby's breath quick and light like bird wings, the mother's deeper, slower, protective even in unconsciousness. Eleanor arrived 3 months ago when her husband died of fever, when the lord of her village decided her cottage would serve better as pasture for his sheep. She brought nothing but the child and the clothes they wore, and you made room because that's what families do. You absorb the displaced, you stretch what little you have to cover one more body, one more mouth, one more story of survival against the far wall. Old Henrik sleeps sitting up his back against the timber, his legs stretched out beneath a blanket worn so thin you can see his bony knees through the weave. Henrik isn't family, isn't even friend really, just an old man who worked the Lord's fields until his body gave out, until his hands couldn't grip the plough handles, until his legs couldn't carry him through a full day's labour. The Lord turned him out like a broken tool, but you took him in because you've seen your own future, in his bent back, in his clouded eyes, and you know that kindness today might be shelter tomorrow. This isn't charity. This isn't noble generosity. This is survival, pure and practical, because bodies in winter mean warmth, mean breath, that adds moisture to air so dry it cracks lips and makes noses bleed, mean another set of ears to listen for danger, another pair of eyes to watch the fire, another voice to join in prayer when someone falls sick and might not wake. You share more than space, you share breath, the air you exhale. Your brother inhales the carbon dioxide that leaves your lungs, feeds something essential in your mother's sleeping body. The oxygen she releases in sleep finds its way to the baby's tiny lungs, to Henrik's laboured breathing, to your father's deep unconscious respiration. You exist in a closed loop of shared air, shared warmth, shared life that no modern person could understand or tolerate. The sounds of communal sleep create their own music. Your mother's wheeze, your brother's mumbles, your father's snores, the baby's tiny sighs, Elena's whispered prayers before she finally surrenders to exhaustion. Henrik's occasional cough that speaks of too many winters, breathing smoke and cold. These sounds don't disturb your rest, they anchor it. They remind you, even in unconsciousness, that you're not alone, that survival is a group effort, that tomorrow's work will be shared among these breathing bodies. Sometimes in the deepest part of night, someone will wake not from nightmare or discomfort, but from instinct bred over generations of shared sleeping. Your mother might rise to adjust the baby's blanket, to check the fire, to whisper a prayer against evil spirits. Your father might stir to listen for wolves or raiders, or the sound of the roof settling under snow. But these wakings don't break the communal rest. They're part of it, like sentries taking turns watching over the group's vulnerability. Privacy doesn't exist here, not in the way modern minds understand it. You know the exact sound your brother makes when he's fighting fever. You've heard your parents' quiet conversations about grain stores, about your sister who died last winter, about whether the Lord will raise the taxes again this year. You've listened to Eleanor sob silently into her infant's hair, grieving a husband whose name no one speaks anymore. These intimacies aren't invasions. They're the texture of life lived without walls, without secrets, without the luxury of keeping your pain to yourself. When someone has nightmares, the whole group feels it. When your brother thrashes from dreams of drowning, when Elena cries out for her dead husband, when your father mutters about battles he fought 20 years ago, the response is immediate. Unconscious hands reach out to soothe voices, whisper comfort into the dark body's shift to offer warmth and presence. The community heals its own wounds, even in sleep, even without conscious thought. This shared vulnerability, this communal rest creates bonds that individual sleep never could. You know these people not just as family or neighbours, but as fellow breathers, fellow dreamers, fellow survivors of another day's brutal work. You trust them with your unconsciousness, with your defenselessness, with the soft, animal vulnerability that sleep demands, and they trust you with theirs. Modern people speak of needing space, needing quiet, needing perfect conditions to rest, but here surrounded by breath and movement and the constant presence of other human lives. Sleep comes easier, not harder, because loneliness, the deep existential loneliness that haunts modern bedrooms, cannot exist when you fall asleep to the sound of your mother's heartbeat, when you wake to your brother's elbow in your ribs, when your rest is woven into the rest of everyone you love, into the breathing of the tribe that keeps you alive. Sleep comes to you in waves, not the uninterrupted 8-hour block that modern people chase with their sleep trackers and optimization routines, but in a rhythm as old as human consciousness itself, a pattern that your bones remember, even if your mind has never learned its name. This is first sleep, the initial descent into darkness that arrives with the dying of the fire, with the settling of bodies into shared warmth, with the natural conclusion of a day that began before dawn and stretched until the last chore was finished. Your eyes close, not from willpower, not from meditation techniques, not from counting backwards from 100, but from the simple weight of eyelids that can no longer fight gravity. Your breathing slows, not because you've practiced breathing exercises, but because your body recognizes the signal that survival has been achieved for another day, that the work is done, that consciousness is no longer required for the immediate business of staying alive. This first sleep is deep, but not complete. It's the sleep of a body that has earned its rest through honest labour, but remains connected to the world around it. Your ears still function in this sleep, still process the sounds that matter. The crack of a burning log that might signal the fire needs tending, the cry of a baby that might need feeding, the distant howl that might mean wolves are closer than usual. But these sounds don't wake you. They simply register in some deeper part of consciousness that sort's important from trivial necessary from ignorable. You dream in this first sleep, but not the anxious fragmented dreams that come from minds overstimulated by screens and information. These dreams move like slow water flowing over familiar stones. Dreams of fields you worked today, of hands you held, of faces around the fire telling stories passed down through generations that no longer distinguish between truth and legend. Your sleeping mind processes the day's experiences not as entertainment, but as information, filing away lessons about which plants to avoid, which animals to trust, which clouds promise rain. The baby wakes twice during this first sleep, once to nurse, once just to cry for reasons that exist only in the mysterious world of infant needs. But these wakings don't shatter your rest. They're part of the natural rhythm of shared sleeping. You hear Elena's soft whispers as she soothes her daughter. You feel the slight movement as she adjusts her position to nurse you. Register these disturbances the way a pond registers a fish jumping briefly present, then absorbed back into stillness. Your brother kicks you once in his sleep, his foot finding your shin with the precision that only siblings possess, even unconsciously. But instead of waking annoyed, instead of shifting away with irritation, you unconsciously absorb the contact, the warmth, the reminder that someone you love is close enough to touch. This isn't invasion, it's confirmation. It's the body's way of maintaining connection, even in unconsciousness, even when the mind has temporarily abandoned its watch. Your father coughs a deep, wet sound that speaks of too many years, breathing smoke and cold and dust, but his cough doesn't alarm you. Doesn't wake you fully, it's simply part of the soundscape of family sleep, like your mother's soft snoring, like Henrik's occasional mutter about lost loves or forgotten names. These sounds weave together into something that resembles silence but isn't silence at all. It's the music of people who have survived another day together, who have earned their rest through collective effort. Time moves differently in this first sleep, not in measured hours, not in the anxious calculation of how much rest remains before the alarm, but in the unmeasured flow of a body following its own rhythm. Your sleep deepens and lightens like breathing, like waves against a shore, following patterns that have nothing to do with clocks and everything to do with the ancient conversation between consciousness and rest, between the day self that works and worries, and the night self that heals and remembers. Sometimes in the depths of this first sleep you drift so deep that you forget you have a name, forget that you exist as anything separate from the breathing mass of family that surrounds you. Forget the specific shape of your worries about whether the grain will last until spring, about whether your sister will find a husband before she's too old, about whether the Lord will demand more taxes or more labour. You become just breath, just warmth, just another cell in the organism of shared survival. But even in this deepest rest part of you remains alert, the part that listened for predators when your ancestors slept in caves, the part that knows the difference between the wind moving through thatch and footsteps moving through snow, the part that can distinguish between your brother's restless dreaming and the genuine distress that requires intervention. This alertness isn't anxiety, it's wisdom. It's the body's way of maintaining vigilance without sacrificing rest. Your breathing synchronizes with the others around you. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through the ancient magic of shared space, shared air, shared survival. All the chests rising and falling in a rhythm that creates its own weather system, its own microclimate of moisture and warmth and carbon dioxide that feeds back into the group's collective rest, that makes sleep deeper, more restorative, more healing than any individual sleep could ever be. The fire burns lower during this first sleep, settling from flame into coal, from coal into ember. But it doesn't die completely, because your father's body knows even in sleep when to wake and add another log, when to stir the coals that will keep the cottage from freezing, that will ensure morning brings warmth instead of the bitter shock of cold air that could kill the very young or very old. This tending happens without conscious thought, without breaking the overall rhythm of rest, like a lighthouse keeper, whose body wakes to maintain the beacon without fully returning to the waking world. Your body uses this first sleep for deep restoration, not just physical recovery, but emotional processing, social bonding, the consolidation of memories that will become part of the collective wisdom that keeps families alive through lean times. Your muscles release the day's tension. Your joints settle into positions that ease the constant ache of physical labour. Your mind sorts through the day's lessons, filing away what worked, discarding what didn't, preparing for tomorrow's challenges. And then somewhere in the deepest part of night, when the fire has settled to glowing coals, when even the mice have grown quiet, when the cold has reached its most penetrating point, your body naturally begins to surface from this first sleep, not because something has disturbed you, not because you've completed some predetermined cycle, but because this is how human sleep was designed to work in two phases, with a gentle natural awakening between them that allows for the transition into the second, deeper, more mysterious phase of night rest that awaits. Your body follows rhythms older than calendars, older than the Roman roads that still scar the landscape, older than the stone churches where priests mark time with bells and prayers. Your life moves with the sun, not fighting it, not trying to extend day into night with artificial light, but accepting the ancient contract between darkness and rest, between dawn and labour that has governed human existence since the first families gathered around the first fires. The sun is your master, but not a cruel one. It rises when your body is ready to wake. It sets when your muscles can work no more. It doesn't demand that you be productive during your least alert hours, doesn't insist that you maintain the same energy at midnight that you have at midday. Instead, it offers a simple bargain: light for work, darkness for rest, warmth for activity, cold for stillness. And your body accepts this bargain gratefully because it remembers what modern bodies have forgotten how to live within natural limits. When winter comes, the days grow short. But instead of fighting this darkness, instead of flooding your world with artificial light that confuses your brain's ancient timing mechanisms, you simply sleep more. You go to bed when the sun disappears behind the hills at 4 in the afternoon. You rise when light returns at 8 in the morning, giving your body the 12 to 16 hours of rest that winter demands that your ancestors knew was necessary for survival in the lean months when food is scarce and warmth precious. Your stomach is your second master, more demanding than the sun but equally honest. When hunger comes, it comes as clear signal, not the artificial hunger created by processed foods designed to trigger cravings, not the emotional eating that comes from boredom or stress, but real hunger. The body's simple request for fuel to continue the work of staying alive. You eat when food is available, you fast when it isn't. Your body learns to store energy during abundance, to burn it slowly during scarcity, creating a natural rhythm of feast and famine that keeps your metabolism flexible, adaptable, strong. There are no midnight snacks in your world, no late-night raids on refrigerators filled with food, designed to stimulate rather than satisfy your last meal, comes hours before sleep bread. If you're lucky, soup made from whatever vegetables haven't rotted in storage, milk still warm from the evening. Milking your body has time to digest this simple food to convert it to energy, or store it as fat before sleep comes, allowing your digestive system to rest along with the rest of you. Instead of working through the night processing artificial ingredients and chemicals that didn't exist when human bodies learned how to sleep, the cold is your teacher, harsh, but fair, showing you the value of shared warmth, the necessity of conserving energy, the wisdom of stillness when movement costs more than it gains. You don't fight the cold with heating systems that maintain artificial temperatures year-round. Instead, you adapt to it. You learn to sleep colder, to huddle closer, to appreciate the precious gift of fire and shared body heat. Your body develops its own heating system, circulation that adjusts to seasonal changes, metabolism that slows in winter speeds in summer fat stores that insulate against the harshest months. Physical pain is your constant companion, but pain with purpose. Not the chronic aches that come from sitting too long staring at screens, too much living in ways human bodies weren't designed for, but acute pain that teaches useful lessons, the burn in your muscles, that tells you you've worked hard enough for one day, the ache in your back, that reminds you to lift with your legs, the sharp protest from hands that have gripped tools too long without rest. This pain doesn't linger, doesn't become the background noise of modern life. Instead, it serves its purpose, then fades, allowing your body to recover. Prepare for tomorrow's necessary work. Weather moves through your life like a river. You don't control it. You flow with it when storms come, you shelter when drought arrives. You conserve when the seasons change, you change with them. Your sleep deepens in winter when long nights demand more. Rest lightens in summer when dawn comes early and work must begin before the heat becomes unbearable. Your body doesn't fight these changes, doesn't try to maintain the same schedule year-round. Instead, it adapts like water, taking the shape of whatever container holds it. The animals around you are teachers too, showing you how natural sleep works, the way chickens roost when light fades, the way cattle lie down together, sharing warmth, conserving energy, the way even the barn cats find sunny spots for afternoon naps when their hunting is done. You learn from their example that rest isn't laziness, isn't something to be ashamed of, but wisdom, the intelligent response to a body that has worked beyond its limits. Your work shapes your sleep, not just through exhaustion, but through connection to natural cycles. Planting season brings early rising and late sleeping. As you race to get seeds in the ground before the rains come, harvest time brings the rhythm of gathering storage preparation for winter that determines whether you'll survive until spring. Each season has its own demands, its own rewards, its own natural pattern of activity and rest that your body learns to anticipate, to prepare for, to embrace. The moon pulls at your sleep the way it pulls at tides, changing the depth and quality of your rest in cycles you feel, but don't consciously track full moons. Bring lighter sleep, more dreams, more middle-of-the-night wakings. New moons bring deeper rest, longer periods of unconsciousness. Your body responds to this ancient timekeeper without needing to understand why, following rhythms that connect you to every human who has ever slept under open sky. Even your breathing follows natural patterns. Not the shallow, anxious breathing of people who live with constant low-level stress, but the deep rhythms of bodies that work hard rest completely. Your lungs expand fully when you sleep, taking in air that smells like wood smoke and earth, and the particular mixture of scents that means home. Your breathing slows during rest speeds, during work, adjusts to altitude, to temperature, to the demands of whatever task requires your body's energy. There are no artificial stimulants in your world, no caffeine to override your body's natural energy cycles, no alcohol to force relaxation that should come naturally, no medications to induce sleep that your exhausted muscles already crave. Instead, your body learns to regulate itself, to find energy when needed to rest, when rest is required to maintain the delicate balance between activity and recovery that keeps you healthy, strong, capable of surviving whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. Your sleep becomes part of the larger rhythm of family community season, connecting you not just to your own body's needs, but to the collective needs of everyone who depends on you, who shares your fire, your food, your shelter, your survival, Sleep isn't separate from life, isn't escape from reality, but integration with the natural world, the acceptance of limits that makes transcendence possible. You learn things about people in shared sleep that no conversation could ever reveal, secrets that only emerge when consciousness retreats, and the body speaks its honest truth, without looking that your mother is having the dreams again, the ones where she searches through empty fields, calling your sister's name because her breathing changes, becomes shallow, urgent, punctuated by small sounds that might be words or might be prayers. You don't wake her from these dreams. You've learned that some grief needs to travel its own path through the landscape of sleep. But you shift closer. Let your warmth remind her sleeping mind that she isn't alone in that empty field. Your brother's body tells you stories about his hidden fears, the way he curls tight when thunder rumbles overhead, pressing his face into the straw as if he could disappear entirely, the way his hands clench into fists when Henrik tells stories about the wars, about villages burned, about children who didn't run fast enough. You see how brave he tries to be during the day, how he squares his shoulders and speaks in a voice deeper than his years. But in sleep his body reveals the child, who still startles at sudden noises, who still reaches for comfort in the dark. Elena's grief lives in her sleep like a fever that won't break. She whispers her dead husband's name so softly you almost miss it, almost think it's just the sound of breath moving through dry lips, but you've heard her say Thomas enough times in daylight to recognize the shape of that word in the dark. Sometimes she argues with him in sleep, a conversation that picks up where death left it incomplete, her voice taking on the tone she must have used when he was late coming home from the fields, when he forgot to bring in the washing before the rain. Your father's sleep carries the weight of every decision he's ever made, every mouth he's failed to feed adequately, every coin he couldn't find for the Lord's taxes, every time he's had to choose between his family's needs and survival itself. He grinds his teeth in sleep, the sound like millstones working grain, and his hands, even in unconsciousness, remain slightly curved, as if still gripping some burden too heavy to set down. His dreams are full of lists, you can tell by the way his lips move silently, counting, calculating, measuring the endless mathematics of scarcity. Henrik dreams in languages you don't recognize, sometimes German, sometimes Latin phrases he learned as a boy. When his family still had hope, he might join the church before hunger and war, and the simple, grinding poverty of peasant life claimed that possibility. He mutters about books he once read, about places he'll never see, about knowledge that died with the teachers who might have shared it. His sleep is populated by ghosts of the man he might have been if the world had been different, if choices had been luxury rather than survival. But you also learn about love in this shared sleeping, about the tender ways bodies care for each other, even in unconsciousness, how your mother's hand finds your father's shoulder when his breathing becomes laboured, how Eleanor automatically adjusts the baby's blanket without fully waking, how your brother unconsciously shares his warmth. Even when you kick him in your own restless dreams, these gestures aren't planned, aren't conscious, but they reveal something deeper than waking kindness. They show the body's own wisdom about connection, about care, about the ways humans heal each other simply by being present. The baby teaches you all about pure need, unfiltered by social convention or embarrassment. When she's hungry, she cries when she's wet, she fusses when she's cold, she presses closer to Eleanor's warmth. Her needs are simple, immediate, honest, and watching Elena respond to these needs, even in the depths of exhaustion, shows you what love looks like when stripped of everything, except the essential commitment to keep another person alive. Her body wakes before her mind does, responding to the baby's distress with movements so automatic they seem like breathing. You discover that each person has their own sleep signature, their own pattern of breathing and movement and sound, that identifies them as clearly as their voice or their walk. Your father's snores come in sets of 3, followed by silence, followed by a deep sigh. Your mother breathes through her mouth when her nose is blocked, creating a soft whistling sound that used to annoy you but now comforts you because it means she's deeply asleep, finally getting the rest her body desperately needs. The cottage itself participates in this intimate knowledge, the way certain floorboards creak under specific weights, so you know without opening your eyes that Henrik is up checking the fire again, or that Elena is walking the baby to calm her fussing, the way the roof settles differently, depending on wind direction and temperature, creating a vocabulary of sounds that speak of weather, coming of seasons, changing of the structural integrity that keeps you all safe through winter storms. Sometimes you wake in the deepest part of night not from disturbance but from awareness, a kind of animal instinct that something in the group's breathing has changed. Someone is too quiet or too restless. Someone needs checking and you lie still listening, sorting through the familiar sounds until you identify what woke you. Maybe your brother's fever has returned. Maybe Elena is crying silently into her baby's hair. Maybe your father's breathing has become too shallow. These wakings aren't intrusions. They're part of the job of being family, the responsibility that comes with shared survival. You learn to sleep through what doesn't matter to wake for what does. Your mother's soft humming as she rocks the baby doesn't disturb your rest, but the change in your father's breathing pattern that might signal his weak heart is struggling brings you immediately alert. The mice scrabbling in the walls fade into background noise, but the subtle shift in air pressure that means snow is coming heavy enough to threaten the roof registers even in your deepest sleep. There's a democracy in this shared sleep, a leveling that daylight never quite achieves. The Lord who owns your land doesn't own your dreams. The church that claims your soul doesn't control your rest. Here in the darkness, wrapped in whatever warmth you can share, everyone breathes the same air, dreams the same desperate dreams of survival, hopes for the same simple things. Enough food, enough warmth, enough time together before the inevitable partings that death or hunger or the Lord's demands will eventually require. Your sleep becomes woven together like cloth, each thread dependent on the others for strength and warmth. You can't imagine sleeping alone now, can't conceive of rest that doesn't include the sound of other breathing, the presence of other dreams, the shared vulnerability that makes survival possible in a world that offers no guarantees beyond the fact that tomorrow will demand everything you have to give, and probably more than you think you can spare. Your eyes open without alarm, without the jarring shock of being torn from sleep by some external demand, but slowly, naturally, like flowers opening to morning light. Except this isn't morning. This is the deep heart of night, the sacred pause between first sleep and second sleep, that your body knows as intimately as it knows hunger or thirst. You don't check a clock because there is no clock. You don't calculate how much sleep remains because time in this moment exists only as the gentle transition from one kind of rest to another. The cottage breathes around you in the darkness, not silent, but filled with the soft sounds of a household at peace. Your father's snoring has quieted to a gentle rumble. Your mother's breathing flows like water over stones, steady and deep. The baby sleeps so quietly you almost can't hear her. Tiny exhales. Elena's breath comes in the rhythm of exhausted mothers everywhere, deep enough to restore but light enough to respond instantly if her child needs her. Henrik mutters something unintelligible, then settles back into stillness. You sit up slowly, feeling the straw shift beneath you, the wool blanket sliding off your shoulders, exposing your skin to air so cold it makes you catch your breath. But this cold isn't shocking, isn't unpleasant, it's honest. Clean the kind of cold that reminds you that life is precious precisely because it's fragile. The fire has burned down to glowing coals, casting just enough light to reveal shapes but not details. The red ember glow touches the timber beams overhead, the clay pots along the wall, the sleeping forms of your family like distant stars in a gentle universe. This waking feels different from the morning waking that will come hours from now, different from the emergency wakings that come when someone is sick or the weather threatens or danger approaches. This is contemplative waking, peaceful, waking the kind that comes when your body has completed the first phase of its healing work and wants a moment to acknowledge the transition before diving deeper into the mysterious second half of night rest. You don't feel urgency, don't feel the need to check anything or fix anything or worry about anything. The cottage is secure, the fire will last until morning. The baby sleeps peacefully in her mother's arms. Your brother's fever broke hours ago, and now he sleeps the clean sleep of recovery. Your mother's cough has quieted. Your father's breathing sounds strong, steady, reliable. These things register in your awareness not as checklist items, but as part of the natural inventory that comes with waking in a world where vigilance is survival. Sometimes you rise during this pause not from necessity but from instinct, padding barefoot across the cold earth floor to the door, cracking it open just enough to peer out into the night. The world outside is transformed by darkness, made mysterious, beautiful in ways that daylight never achieves. Snow, if it's winter, reflects what little starlight filters through the clouds, creating a landscape that seems to glow from within the forest. Beyond the clearing stands like a wall of secrets every tree, a sentinel guarding stories you'll never know. The cold air that slips through the cracked door carries scents that tell you about the night, about the weather coming about the season's progress, the metallic smell that means snow, the green scent of earth warming towards spring, the smoky fragrance from other cottages where other families tend their own fires, fight their own battles against the cold, maintain their own fragile holds on survival. You breathe this air deep into your lungs, feeling it clean away the staleness of shared breath, shared sleep, shared life. You might step outside entirely if the night calls to you, if the moon is full enough to light your way to the necessary house, if your bladder demands relief that can't wait until morning. The cold strikes your feet like a blessing, sharp and clean, reminding you that you're alive, that your body works, that even this small discomfort is proof of functioning circulation, functioning nerves, functioning life. You don't hurry, don't rush back to warmth. Instead, you stand for a moment, letting the cold teach you about gratitude, about the precious gift of shelter, of shared warmth, of a place to return to. Back inside, you don't immediately lie down. Instead, you sit cross-legged on the edge of the sleeping platform, listening to the night sounds both inside and outside the cottage, the settle and creak of timber, adjusting to temperature changes, the whisper of wind through thatch, the distant call of an owl hunting in the forest. These sounds don't disturb the peace, they deepen it. They remind you that you're part of a larger world, that life continues beyond these walls, that you're connected to rhythms and cycles that extend far beyond your own small concerns. This is the time for prayer. If prayer comes to you, not the formal prayers of church services with their Latin words and rigid structures, but the simple conversations you have with whatever force you believe watches over families like yours, protects children through long winters, keeps fires burning, keeps hearts beating, keeps hope alive when hope seems impossible. You don't ask for much in these prayers, maybe for the grain to last until harvest, maybe for Elena's baby to stay healthy, maybe for your brother to grow strong, maybe for one more day of survival in a world that promises nothing. Sometimes you simply sit in the darkness, letting your mind wander through memories, through hopes, through the strange half-thoughts that only come in the deep of night. You remember your sister's laugh. You worry about whether the roof will hold through the next storm. You wonder what your children will remember about these nights, whether they'll think about the way their father sat awake sometimes in the darkness, listening to them breathe, watching over their sleep, guarding their dreams. Your body cools slowly during this pause. Blood circulation slowing, breathing, deepening muscles, releasing the last tension from the day's work, but not fully relaxing, not dropping into the complete surrender that second sleep will bring. This is rest but aware, rest, peaceful but vigilant, the kind of consciousness that stands guard at the border between sleep and waking, making sure everything is safe before allowing the deeper dive into unconsciousness. Other members of the family sometimes wake during this pause too. Your mother might rise to check the fire, to adjust blankets, to whisper a prayer. Your father might step outside to relieve himself, to check that the door is secure, to listen for sounds that don't belong. These wakings aren't planned, aren't coordinated, but they often overlap, as if the family's sleeping body has its own wisdom about when vigilance is needed, when the sacred pause should be shared rather than solitary. When you do speak during these dark hours, you speak quietly, not wanting to fully wake anyone, but knowing that soft voices in the darkness are part of the comfort of shared sleeping. Maybe you whisper to your mother about the dream you just left. Maybe you murmur reassurance to your brother if his sleep seems troubled. Maybe you share a few words with Elena about her baby's breathing, about the hope that tomorrow will be easier. These conversations are fragments, half-finished thoughts, shared in the safety of darkness, where truth feels easier to speak, and then gradually, naturally, without decision or effort, your body begins to call you back to sleep, not the light. First, sleep you've just emerged from, but the deeper second sleep that waits ahead like a warm ocean ready to receive you. You lie back down, pull the wool blanket up to your chin, feel the straw settle beneath your weight, feel your breathing slow, feel your muscles release their last hold on consciousness, and prepare to dive deeper into the mysterious healing darkness that will carry you through to dawn. You sink back into the straw, but this time the descent feels different, deeper, more complete than the first sleep that carried you through the early hours of night. This is second sleep, the profound rest that comes after the body has acknowledged. The transition has checked, on survival has ensured that all is well, and now allows itself to fall into a depth of unconsciousness that modern people never reach, never even know exists because they've never earned it, through the honest transaction of exhaustion and surrender. Your breathing slows not just to the steady rhythm of regular sleep, but to something deeper, more primal, the kind of breathing that happens when consciousness releases its grip entirely, when the body finally trusts that it's safe to let go completely. Your chest rises and falls like tide pools filling and emptying with the ocean's most ancient rhythm. Your heart rate drops to its lowest sustainable point, pumping just enough blood to maintain the essential functions, while everything else shuts down, goes dark, enters the sacred space of true restoration. This sleep doesn't ask permission, doesn't negotiate with your mind, doesn't worry about whether you've processed the day's events or planned tomorrow's tasks. It simply takes you the way gravity takes a stone dropped from height, inevitable, complete without resistance. Your body melts into the straw, into the shared warmth, into the breathing darkness that surrounds and penetrates and becomes you until you can't tell where your sleeping form ends and the cottage's protective embrace begins. Your muscles release tension you didn't even know they were holding. Not just the obvious places, the shoulders that carried water buckets, the back that bent over crops, the legs that walked miles over rough ground, but deeper tensions, the small muscles around your eyes that squint against wind and sun, the jaw that clenches during difficult conversations with the Lord's steward, the stomach that tightens when food runs low. These microscopic holdings of stress dissolve like salt in warm water, leaving your body looser, more fluid than it ever gets to be in waking life. Dreams come, but not the anxious, spiraling dreams of minds overstimulated by artificial light and information. These dreams move like deep water, slow, powerful, carrying you through landscapes that feel more real than memory, through conversations with people long dead, through experiences that your waking mind couldn't imagine. But your sleeping consciousness recognizes as necessary. Healing, the kind of nocturnal processing that knits together the torn places in your spirit, the damaged connections between hope and reality. You dream of abundant harvests, of tables heavy with bread and meat and fruit, of children's laughter, echoing through warm summer evenings, of your sister alive again running through fields that stretch beyond the horizon. These dreams don't torment you with impossibility. They nourish you with remembrance, with the knowledge that joy exists, that life contains more than survival, that somewhere in the texture of existence beauty persists, even when daily experience offers little evidence of its presence. Sometimes in this second sleep you dream of yourself as different, more than peasant, more than serf, more than someone whose life belongs to another person, whose labour enriches distant lords, whose children may never know anything beyond the narrow confines of feudal obligation. These dreams don't come as escape, but as reminder that underneath the social structures that define your waking hours lives a human being whose worth doesn't depend on productivity, whose value transcends economic utility. Your body uses this deep sleep for restoration that goes beyond physical healing, beyond the simple repair of muscles and joints worn down by labour. This is cellular regeneration, the kind of profound recovery that happens only when consciousness withdraws completely, when the body's healing systems can work without interference from worry about tomorrow's bread, about the Lord's demands, about whether the baby's cough means fever, about all the countless concerns that occupy the surface mind during waking hours. Blood flows differently in this second sleep, carrying nutrients and oxygen to places that get shortchanged during the day, when circulation focuses on the muscles and organs needed for immediate survival. Now healing happens in the deep tissues in the bone marrow, where new blood cells form in the organs of elimination, that clear away the accumulated toxins of hard living in the immune system, that fights off the constant assault of disease and malnutrition and stress. Your brain bathes itself in this deep sleep, washing away the metabolic waste that accumulates during conscious thought, consolidating memories not just of facts and events, but of feelings, of relationships, of the subtle lessons that survival teaches about trust, about courage, about the difference between giving up and letting go. These neural housekeeping functions happen only in the deepest phases of sleep, only when the mind stops trying to control and allows the body's ancient wisdom to take over. The cottage itself seems to sleep more deeply around you, the timber beams settling into their most relaxed configuration, the fire burning with perfect efficiency, requiring no tending, no adjustment, the very air growing thicker, more nurturing, as if the space itself recognizes that this is sacred time when healing happens, when bodies and spirits restore themselves for whatever challenges dawn will bring. Even the baby sleeps differently in these hours, her tiny body following the same ancient pattern, diving deeper into rest that allows rapid growth cellular development, the formation of neural pathways that will serve her throughout whatever life awaits her. Elena's breathing synchronizes with her daughter's, creating a feedback loop of shared rest, shared healing that demonstrates how deeply connected human biology remains to the rhythms of communal survival. Your father's worn heart finds its easiest rhythm in this deep sleep, the cardiovascular system finally getting the rest it needs to repair the damage done by decades of heavy labor, the stress of constant worry about providing for family, about meeting obligations, about surviving. In a world that offers no safety net beyond the strength of your own back, the loyalty of your own kin. Temperature regulation happens differently in second sleep, your body learning to maintain warmth with minimal energy expenditure, sharing heat more efficiently with the sleeping forms around you, the metabolism slowing to conservation mode that allows survival on fewer calories than modern bodies require, because this rest is so complete, so restorative, that less fuel accomplishes more recovery. This is the sleep that heals not just bodies, but souls, not just individuals, but families, not just the immediate concerns of survival, but the deeper wounds that come from living, always on the edge of catastrophe, always one failed harvest, one harsh winter, one arbitrary demand from authority away from starvation or exposure or separation. This sleep doesn't solve these problems, doesn't change the brutal realities of peasant life, but it provides the deep restoration that makes endurance possible, that allows hope to survive even when hope seems irrational. And in this profound rest you discover something that no amount of wealth or comfort or modern convenience can replicate: the peace that comes from having nothing left to give, from having spent yourself completely in service of life and love and survival, the satisfaction of a body that has worked beyond its limits and earned through that expenditure the right to rest, without guilt, without anxiety, without the nagging sense that you should be doing something productive. Instead, you've never heard the word sleep hygiene, but if you had, they would sound like foreign language, like concepts from a world so divorced from reality that they might as well describe how to breathe underwater or fly without wings, yet somehow impossibly your sleep is cleaner, purer, more restorative than anything the future will achieve with all its knowledge, all its technology, all its desperate attempts to engineer rest in bodies that have forgotten how to surrender naturally to the darkness. There are no sleep specialists in your world, no doctors who spend years studying the mechanics of rest, no researchers measuring REM cycles and sleep stages, no pharmaceutical companies developing pills to force unconsciousness into bodies that fight it, no billion-dollar industry built around the simple act of closing your eyes and letting go. Yet every night, without exception, you achieve what sleep clinics and expensive mattresses and white noise machines and temperature-controlled bedrooms will never quite deliver: total, complete, uncompromising rest. You don't track your sleep cycles, don't measure your heart rate variability, don't worry about whether you're getting enough deep sleep or too much light sleep, don't optimize your bedroom environment, or follow elaborate bedtime routines designed to signal your brain that rest is coming. You simply work until exhaustion makes consciousness impossible, then lie down and disappear into darkness that asks nothing of you, except that you stop fighting and let healing happen. Modern people will spend fortunes on mattresses engineered with space-age materials designed to cradle every curve of the human body to eliminate pressure points to maintain perfect spinal alignment, while you sleep on straw that pokes at your ribs on boards that creak under your weight covered by wool, so rough it would be considered primitive torture by future standards. Yet your spine straightens itself during sleep, your joints decompress your muscles, release tension in ways that no amount of technological innovation will ever improve upon, because discomfort accepted becomes comfort earned. They will fill their bedrooms with machines that generate precise frequencies of sound to mask the chaos of modern life: white noise, brown noise, pink noise, carefully calibrated to promote deeper sleep while you rest in a cottage where mice scurry through the walls, where wind whistles through gaps in the timber, where your father snores and your brother mutters and the baby cries, and somehow all these sounds become not distraction, but symphony, Not interference, but confirmation that life continues, that you are held within the breathing body of family, that solitude is the enemy of rest, not noise. Future generations will discover that blue light from screens destroys melatonin production, that exposure to artificial illumination tricks the brain into thinking. It's still daytime that humans need darkness, absolute and complete, to trigger the hormonal cascades that bring deep sleep. They will develop special glasses and filters and bulbs that promise to restore natural circadian rhythms, while you live in darkness, so profound that your eyes learn to see by starlight, by ember, glow, by the subtle gradations of shadow that distinguish midnight from dawn. They will learn that room temperature affects sleep quality, that bodies rest best in cool environments, that overheated bedrooms lead to restless nights, and they will install climate control systems that maintain precise temperatures year-round while you sleep in cold, so sharp it turns your breath to fog so penetrating that ice forms on the inside walls of the cottage. Yet this cold doesn't disturb your rest. It deepens it, because your body has learned to generate heat through shared warmth, through the miraculous efficiency of multiple humans, breathing together, dreaming together, healing together. Modern sleep experts will discover that what you eat affects how you sleep, that heavy meals before bed disrupt rest, that alcohol, despite seeming to help with falling asleep, actually fragments sleep architecture. Preventing the deep restorative phases that true healing requires, they will develop elaborate dietary protocols, timing restrictions, lists of foods to avoid before bedtime while you eat your last meal, hours before sleep, not by design but by necessity. Bread that's already gone stale, soup made from vegetables that might not last another day, milk that won't keep until morning, and your body processes this simple food, completely allows digestion to finish before sleep begins, leaving your system free to focus entirely on restoration. They will realize that stress and anxiety are the enemies of good sleep, that racing thoughts and worry prevent the mental shutdown necessary for deep rest, and they will develop meditation apps, breathing techniques, progressive muscle, relaxation-guided imagery, all designed to quiet minds that have forgotten how to be still while your mind empties itself naturally. Not because you've learned special techniques, but because exhaustion is the most effective meditation ever invented, because bodies that have worked beyond their limits don't have energy left for anxiety. Sleep researchers will discover that humans naturally follow a biphasic sleep pattern, that our ancestors slept in 2 phases with a period of wakefulness in between, that this segmented sleep is more restorative than the uninterrupted 8-hour blocks that modern life demands, and they will try to recreate this ancient rhythm through careful scheduling while you simply follow the pattern your body remembers, sleeping first when darkness falls, waking naturally in the deep of night for quiet contemplation, then returning to even deeper rest without ever thinking of this as anything other than normal. They will learn that sleep is social, that humans rest better when they feel safe and connected, that isolation disrupts sleep patterns, that the sound of other people breathing nearby actually promotes deeper sleep, and they will develop technologies to simulate presence, to create artificial sounds of companionship while you sleep surrounded by the actual breathing of people you love, whose safety depends on your vigilance, whose survival is woven together with yours, whose dreams and fears and hopes share the same small space, where rest becomes not just personal renewal, but communal healing. The future will discover that modern life fights against everything that promotes good sleep, that artificial light and processed food and sedentary lifestyles and chronic stress and social isolation and constant stimulation create conditions that make rest nearly impossible, and they will spend billions trying to engineer solutions to problems they've created, while you live naturally within the conditions that make perfect sleep inevitable, not through wisdom, but through necessity, not through choice, but through the simple fact that survival demands rest, and rest demands surrender, and surrender comes easily to bodies that have nothing left to give. You weren't born expecting comfort. That concept doesn't exist in your world. Comfort is what happens to other people, people whose names you'll never know, who live in stone houses with multiple rooms, who sleep alone in beds large enough for entire families, who change their clothes when they become dirty, rather than wearing them until they fall apart. You were born into a world where discomfort is the baseline, where ease is the exception, where every moment of relief from pain or cold or hunger is a gift to be received with gratitude, not something owed to you by existence. Your body learned early that fighting circumstances you can't control wastes energy that could be used for survival, That acceptance isn't defeat but wisdom, that flowing with hardship rather than against it conserves strength for the battles you might actually win. You don't spend mental energy wishing the straw was softer, the cottage warmer, the blanket thicker. Instead, you work with what exists. You find warmth in shared bodies. You discover that straw pressed down by sleeping becomes more comfortable than straw fought against. You learn that resistance multiplies suffering, while surrender often reveals hidden forms of comfort. The cold that would send modern people running for thermostats and heating systems becomes your teacher, showing you how to appreciate the smallest increases in temperature, how to treasure the warmth of another body, how to find pleasure in the simple act of pulling a wool blanket closer to your chin. Your body develops its own internal heating system, circulation that adjusts to seasonal changes, metabolism that learns to burn fuel more efficiently, fat stores that insulate during the coldest months. You don't fight winter, you dance with it. Hunger teaches you lessons that no philosophy could convey about the difference between wanting and needing, about the way the body adapts to scarcity, about the sweetness that comes into simple food when you've truly earned it. A piece of bread when you're genuinely hungry tastes better than any feast consumed from boredom or habit. Your stomach learns to find satisfaction in less, to stretch meals to extract maximum nutrition from minimal resources, to distinguish between the hollow ache of real need and the vague dissatisfaction that comes from abundance taken for granted. Pain becomes information rather than emergency. The ache in your back after a day of bending over crops tells you you've worked hard enough. The burn in your muscles after hauling water reminds you that your body is strong, capable of more than you thought possible. The cuts on your hands from handling rough tools without gloves teach you to be more careful next time, but they don't send you searching for remedies for ways to eliminate discomfort. Instead, they become part of the landscape of living, part of the honest conversation between your body and the world it moves through. You don't waste energy fighting the rhythms that govern your existence. The sun rises, you rise. The sun sets, you rest. Rain comes, you shelter drought, arrives. You conserve your life, moves within natural limits, rather than trying to transcend them. And this acceptance creates a kind of peace that people who fight constantly against circumstances beyond their control never experience. Your body isn't at war with the environment. It's in conversation with it, learning from it, adapting to it, finding ways to thrive within conditions that can't be changed. Sleep comes easily, not because your bed is comfortable, but because your body has learned to find rest anywhere, to extract maximum restoration from whatever circumstances present themselves. You don't need perfect conditions to sleep deeply. You need only exhaustion, honestly earned, and the basic safety of shared warmth, shared vigilance, shared survival. Your nervous system doesn't stay activated, fighting against discomfort. Instead, it settles into the rhythm of what is rather than what might be if things were different. Your expectations align with reality rather than fighting against it. You don't expect tomorrow to be easier than today. You don't assume that comfort is your birthright. You don't measure your life against some imaginary standard of how things should be. Instead, you find richness within limitations, beauty within hardship, moments of joy that shine brighter because they're rare. Your happiness doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. It depends on finding grace within whatever circumstances exist. The concept of control as modern people understand it simply doesn't apply to your life. You can't control the weather, the Lord's demands, the success or failure of crops, whether disease strikes your family, whether war comes to your region. This lack of control could be terrifying, but instead it becomes liberating, because when you can't control outcomes, you're free to focus entirely on responses, on doing whatever you can with whatever you have, on finding meaning in effort rather than results. Your body learns to trust processes larger than itself, the way crops grow in their own time, the way seasons change according to laws beyond human influence, the way healing happens when given space and time rather than when demanded immediately. This trust extends to sleep, to the natural cycles of consciousness that your body follows without interference from anxiety about whether you're sleeping correctly, whether you're getting enough rest, whether tomorrow you'll feel rested enough to function. You don't fight your own limitations. Instead, you work within them, the way water works within the banks of a river, finding its path around obstacles rather than trying to destroy them. Your energy goes toward adaptation rather than resistance, toward creativity within constraints rather than anger about boundaries, toward making the most of what's possible rather than grieving what isn't. Modern people will develop entire industries around optimizing sleep, around creating perfect conditions, around engineering solutions to problems created by fighting against natural rhythms, while you simply accept that some nights will be colder, some harder, some interrupted by sick children or worried thoughts, and that rest comes anyway because the body's wisdom is deeper than circumstances, because exhaustion earned through honest labour demands its due, regardless of whether conditions are ideal. This acceptance creates a kind of spiritual maturity that comfort can never teach, a wisdom that comes only from learning to find peace within chaos, to discover rest within discomfort, to locate joy within struggle. Your sleep becomes not escape from difficulty but integration with it. Not resistance to the way things are, but deep, profound acceptance that allows true healing to happen. Not just of the body, but of the relationship between self and world, between desire and reality, between the life you have and the life you might wish for. The peace you find in sleep comes not from having everything you want, but from wanting nothing other than what you have in this moment, warmth shared with people you love, breath moving easily through lungs that still work, a heart that still beats steadily, through another night, another chance to wake to morning, to discover what gifts another day might bring within the endless constraints and possibilities of a life lived close to the bone, close to the earth, close to the irreducible truth of what it means to be human. Sleep is not a break from your life. It is the foundation upon which your life rests. Not an escape from reality, but the deepest engagement with the sacred rhythms that make reality possible. You don't lie down each night to avoid the world, but to rejoin the ancient conversation between consciousness and darkness, between effort and restoration, between the individual body and the larger body of earth and sky and seasons that holds all bodies within its breathing. Embrace, every night when you close your eyes, you perform an act of faith more profound than any prayer spoken in church, more trusting than any vow made before witnesses, because sleep requires the ultimate surrender, the complete abandonment of control, the willingness to become utterly vulnerable in a world where vulnerability often means death. Yet night after night you make this offering. You give yourself to the darkness without guarantee that dawn will return, without promise that you'll wake to find your family still breathing, still warm, still alive. This faith isn't conscious, isn't theological, isn't based on doctrine or belief, but on something deeper. The body's own wisdom about what it needs to continue the cellular knowledge that healing happens only in surrender, that restoration requires the temporary death of consciousness, that true strength comes not from fighting, but from knowing when to stop fighting, when to lay down the burden of awareness and trust that something larger will carry you through the dangerous hours of night. You sleep in a world where death is always present, where children don't survive their first winter, where wounds become infected and kill strong men, where fever takes mothers and leaves orphans, where accidents with animals or tools or fire end lives, without warning, where the Lord's soldiers might arrive at dawn demanding grain or sons or both, where raiders from neighbouring regions might see the smoke from your chimney and decide your family's meagre possessions are worth killing for. Yet despite all this, despite the rational reasons for staying awake, staying alert, staying ready, you still close your eyes. This trust goes deeper than personal faith. It connects you to every human who has ever lived, who has ever faced the choice between vigilance and rest, who has ever had to decide whether survival requires constant alertness or whether true survival sometimes demands the courage to stop watching, to stop protecting, to stop controlling, and allow vulnerability, because the body cannot heal while it remains defensive, cannot restore while it stays ready for battle, cannot regenerate while it maintains the tension of perpetual readiness. Your sleep becomes prayer without words, worship without ritual, the daily offering of your consciousness to forces you don't understand, but have learned to trust the way you trust your heart, to keep beating your lungs, to keep breathing your blood, to keep flowing. Without conscious direction, you trust sleep to do its work of healing, weaving restoration, not because you understand the mechanisms, but because you've experienced the results. You've felt the difference between a night of rest and a night of wakefulness. You know in your bones that sleep is not luxury but necessity, not comfort but survival. The cottage itself becomes temple during these hours, not because it's beautiful or sacred in any conventional sense, but because it holds what is most precious. The breathing bodies of people you love, the shared warmth that keeps death at bay, the collective vulnerability that somehow creates strength, the way individual threads become fabric when woven together. Individual breaths become the breath of survival when shared within the same small space bounded by walls, thin enough that winter wind could destroy them, yet strong enough to hold what matters most. You don't question whether you deserve rest. Don't worry about whether you've earned the right to sleep. Don't calculate whether you've been productive enough to merit restoration. These concepts belong to a world where sleep is commodity, where rest must be purchased, where exhaustion is badge of honor rather than natural consequence of honest labor. You sleep because your body demands it, because survival requires it, because tomorrow's work depends on tonight's restoration, not because you've met some external standard of worthiness. The darkness that surrounds your sleep is not empty, not absent of meaning, but full of presence, thick with the accumulated dreams of all who have slept in this place before you, the ancestors whose bodies pressed the same straw, whose breath warmed the same cold air, whose hopes and fears and loves played out in the same small space, night after night, season after season, year after year, until their individual stories became part of the larger story of human endurance, human tenderness, human faith in the face of uncertainty. When you wake in the morning, you wake not as individual who has escaped death for another night, but as part of something larger, part of the continuing story of families who shelter together, who share breath and warmth and dreams, who find ways to love each other, even when love seems impractical, even when survival seems to require harder hearts than love allows. Your sleep connects you, not just to rest, but to the sacred work of maintaining human connection, human kindness, human hope, in a world that offers little evidence that such things matter. This sacred dimension of sleep doesn't make your life easier, doesn't solve the problems of poverty and powerlessness and vulnerability that define peasant existence, but it provides something that no amount of wealth or security could replace: the deep peace that comes from being part of rhythms larger than individual ambition, larger than personal desire, larger than the small anxious self that worries about tomorrow's bread, today's chores, yesterday's mistakes. Your sleep becomes act of resistance against despair, against the temptation to believe that life is nothing more than suffering, that existence is only endurance, that survival is the highest aspiration available to creatures like you. Because in sleep, you remember something. Your waking mind often forgets that you are more than your circumstances, more than your labor, more than your fear that somewhere beneath the daily struggle for bread and warmth and safety lives something irreducible, something that no lord can tax, no winter can freeze, no hardship can destroy. The trust you place in sleep extends beyond personal healing, beyond individual restoration to faith in continuation itself. Faith that morning will come, that your children will grow, that seasons will change, that somehow life will persist, that love will survive, that the story will continue beyond your own small chapter in the vast book of human endurance. And in that faith you find not just rest, but the strength to rise again, to face another day, to continue the ancient work of staying alive, staying human, staying connected to the sacred thread that weaves individual lives into the larger fabric of existence. Dawn comes not as interruption, but as invitation, not as alarm tearing you from rest, but as gentle summoning back to the world of waking breath and movement, and the endless work of staying alive. You open your eyes slowly, without shock, without the jarring transition from unconsciousness to urgent activity that will define future mornings in future lives. Instead, you surface from sleep the way you might surface from deep water, rising gradually toward light, toward air, toward the responsibilities that await, but without the violence of being yanked from one state into another. The cottage breathes around you with the quiet sounds of a household waking. Naturally, your mother stirs first, as mothers always do, her body attuned to rhythms older than clocks, older than schedules, the rhythm that knows when babies will wake hungry, when children will need tending, when the fire will require feeding, to keep the cold from creeping back into the sanctuary you've built together through shared breath, shared warmth, shared vigilance through the night. You lie still for a moment longer, not from laziness, but from wisdom, from the understanding that transition requires gentleness, that the body needs time to remember itself, to gather the scattered pieces of consciousness that sleep has allowed, to drift, to prepare for the return to the world where decisions matter, where choices have consequences, where survival depends on attention to details that sleep mercifully allows you to forget. Your breath fogs in the cold air, but this cold doesn't shock you, doesn't send you scrambling for warmth, because your body remembers how to be cold, how to generate heat from within, how to find comfort in discomfort. That comes not as punishment, but as a reminder that you are alive, that nerve endings function, that circulation flows, that the miraculous machinery of human existence continues to work despite everything the world has thrown at it. Around you, the others begin their own gentle ascent from sleep, each following their own internal rhythm. Your brother stretches and yawns. Your father coughs and clears his throat. Elena whispers to her baby, who makes the small sounds that infants make when transitioning from sleep to waking. Henrik mutters something about dreams or weather, or the ache in joints that have served him faithfully for decades. These sounds don't disturb the peace, they deepen it. They remind you that you're part of something larger than individual consciousness. The straw beneath you is flattened during the night, shaped by your body's weight into something that almost resembles comfort. Not the engineered comfort that future generations will take for granted, but earned comfort. Comfort that comes from acceptance rather than expectation, from working with what exists rather than demanding what doesn't. The straw holds, the warmth of your body holds the shape of your rest, holds the imprint of another night survived, another passage through the dangerous hours when spirits are said to wander, when the boundary between life and death grows thin. You sit up slowly, feeling your spine remember its daytime configuration, feeling muscles that relaxed completely during sleep begin to engage with the prospect of movement of work, of the 100 small tasks that will fill the hours between now and tonight's return to rest. There's no urgency in this awakening, no panic about time running out, no calculation of how many minutes remain before obligations begin. Instead, there's the simple acknowledgement that rest has ended, that consciousness has returned, that the day offers its own gifts and challenges. The fire has burned low, but not out the coals still glow with enough warmth to catch new kindling to flare back into flame with patient tending. This is how survival works, not through dramatic gestures or heroic efforts, but through the quiet, persistent attention to details that keep life moving forward, one breath, one heartbeat, one small flame at a time. Your father rises first, as he always does, moving quietly to spare the rest of you a few more moments of warmth before the day's demands begin. Outside the small window, the sky shows the first pale hints of dawn, not the artificial brightness of electric lights, but the gradual transition from black to grey, to the faintest suggestion of blue that means another day has arrived, another chance to work, to love, to endure, to find moments of joy within the endless struggle for survival. The light doesn't command you to rise, doesn't demand immediate action. Instead, it offers possibility. The suggestion that waking might bring something worth experiencing. You think about the sleep you've just left, not with the analytical mind that future people will bring to rest, not with concern about whether it was optimal, whether you achieved the right balance of sleep phases, whether you feel sufficiently rested for the day ahead, but with simple gratitude for the mystery of consciousness departing and returning, for the healing that happens in darkness, for the way exhaustion becomes restoration, becomes energy, becomes the foundation for another day's honest labour. This is what you carry forward from the night, not just physical renewal but spiritual restoration, the deep peace that comes from knowing you belong to rhythms larger than individual will, larger than personal ambition, larger than the small anxious self that worries about tomorrow, because you've spent the night held within the breathing body of family, within the ancient covenant between darkness and rest, within the sacred contract that promises healing to those who surrender completely to vulnerability. The sleep you return from each morning isn't just personal recovery, it's participation in something timeless, something that connects you to every human who has ever closed their eyes in trust that consciousness would return, to every family who has ever huddled together through cold nights, to every generation that has passed down through their bodies the wisdom about rest, about community, about survival that no book could contain, no teacher could explain, no institution could preserve. As you prepare to rise to begin another day of work that will earn tonight's rest, you carry with you the knowledge that sleep belongs to you, not because you own it, but because you are part of it, part of the great breathing rhythm that sustains all life, part of the ancient conversation between effort and recovery, between individual need and collective survival, between the temporary consciousness that worries and plans and fears, and the deeper wisdom that knows how to heal, how to restore, how to prepare for whatever tomorrow might bring. This inheritance, this gift, this nightly return to the source of strength that keeps families alive through winters that could kill, through summers that might fail, through all the countless challenges that define human existence. You carry this forward not as memory, but as living practice, as daily proof that some things cannot be taken from you, cannot be taxed or stolen or burned or destroyed. The ability to close your eyes, to trust the darkness, to surrender completely to forces larger than fear, larger than scarcity, larger than all the reasons why rest should be impossible, tonight when the work is done, when exhaustion once again demands its due, when darkness falls like a gentle hand over eyes that have seen enough for one day, you will return to this sacred practice, this ancient wisdom, this inheritance that belongs not just to medieval peasants, but to every human who remembers how to sleep without fighting, how to rest without guilt, how to surrender consciousness in service of something larger than individual survival, in service of the great breathing body of life itself that holds us all. You wake years later, decades later, in a world that has learned to measure everything, including sleep, but has forgotten how to surrender to it. You open your eyes to artificial light that never truly dims, to the constant hum of machines that promise comfort, but deliver only distraction, to a bedroom designed for one person, isolated from the breathing warmth of family, from the shared vulnerability that once made rest sacred, and for a moment you remember. You remember what it felt like to earn your exhaustion through honest labour, to fall asleep because your body had no choice but to surrender, to lie down in straw that poked your ribs but held your warmth, to share breath with people whose survival depended on yours, whose dreams wove together with yours, in the darkness of a cottage that offered no privacy but infinite intimacy. You remember sleep that came not as escape, but as return, not as individual recovery, but as participation in the great breathing rhythm that sustains all life. The memory fades, as memories do, replaced by the urgent demands of a world that never stops demanding your attention. But something remains, something your body carries forward through all the changes, through electricity and automobiles and air conditioning and smartphones, through all the innovations that promise to make life easier, but somehow make rest harder. The cellular knowledge that sleep is sacred, that exhaustion honestly earned deserves complete surrender, that healing happens in darkness shared with others. You try to explain this to friends, to family, to anyone who will listen, but the words sound strange in a world where sleep is problem to be solved rather than gift to be received, where rest must be optimized rather than accepted, where even unconsciousness becomes performance, measured, tracked, analyzed for efficiency. You sound like someone describing a foreign country, a place so different from current reality that it might as well be fiction. But sometimes, in the deep of night, when all the devices are finally silent, when the artificial lights have dimmed, when you lie still enough to hear your own heartbeat, you remember that the capacity for that ancient sleep still lives in your body, still waits in your bones, still calls from the darkness that exists even in bedrooms flooded with electric light. Your cells remember the cottage, the straw, the shared warmth, the honest exhaustion that made surrender possible. You realize that what medieval peasants had wasn't poverty of comfort, but richness of rhythm, wasn't absence of luxury, but presence of necessity, wasn't lack of choice, but wisdom about what choices matter. They had something that all the sleep technology, all the research, all the optimization and engineering and pharmaceutical intervention cannot recreate. They had bodies that knew how to trust darkness, minds that knew how to stop fighting spirits, that knew how to surrender completely to the healing that happens only when consciousness steps aside. And you understand finally that the best sleep in human history belonged to people who had almost nothing because they understood something that abundance makes difficult to remember. That rest is not reward for productivity, but foundation for humanity, that exhaustion earned through caring for others, through tending the fire, through sharing warmth, creates the kind of fatigue that heals rather than depletes. That sleep surrounded by breathing bodies connected to seasonal rhythms, aligned with natural cycles, becomes something sacred, something that no individual comfort can replace. The peasants sleep on in memory, in the stories that bodies tell when they remember how to be tired without being wired, how to be exhausted without being anxious, how to close eyes without checking one more notification, how to surrender consciousness without fighting the surrender they sleep on, in the dreams of people who have forgotten how to dream deeply, in the rest that modern bodies crave but don't know how to achieve. Tonight, when you lie down in your comfortable bed, in your climate-controlled room surrounded by all the innovations that promise perfect sleep, you might remember for just a moment what it felt like to earn your rest through honest work, to share your sleep with people you loved, to trust the darkness completely, to surrender not just consciousness but control to forces larger than individual will, and in that remembering you might find your way back to the ancient wisdom that knew how to sleep, not just well, but truly deeply, completely the way human beings were always meant to rest. The cottage still stands somewhere in memory. The fire still glows, the straw still holds the warmth of bodies long gone, but the sleep they achieved, the rest, they found the healing they discovered in surrender to exhaustion, honestly earned this inheritance, still waits in the darkness, still calls from the depths of night, still offers itself to anyone willing to remember that the best sleep comes not from perfect conditions, but from perfect trust in the ancient rhythm that rocks all life to rest. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.